I stood there in the grand lobby of the Ocean View Resort in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, watching my own children walk away laughing toward the elevator without a single glance back, their rolling suitcases bouncing behind them across the polished marble floor as if they were free from some invisible weight. And then I heard my son-in-law, Brian, married to my daughter, Nicole, mutter something about finally being free of the burden, and they all laughed. The kind of laugh that slices through your chest because you know it's aimed at you even when they don't say your name. And in that moment, my world seemed to tilt, though I kept my face composed, pretending to admire the grand fountain in the center of the lobby as if I hadn't heard a thing. But I had, every word, and they didn't know I had paid for every cent of that reservation with the money I had scraped together over 8 long months of selling pecan pies and apple cobblers at the Sunday farmers market in town, tucking away dollar bills and loose change into an old cookie tin I hid behind the dusty cans of beans in my pantry, guarding it like it was gold. And they didn't know about the nights I sewed aprons and hemmed pants for neighbors to add a few extra bucks. Didn't know that I had pawned the only piece of jewelry my late husband left me, a gold band with a tiny diamond, so I could cover the deposit. And most of all, they didn't know what I was about to do to them, because even though they thought I was weak, the quiet widow who always said yes, this time I had my own plan. But before I tell you what came next, let me take you back to the beginning, because it started 3 weeks earlier on a Tuesday afternoon when the sunlight poured warm and yellow through the lace curtains in my little kitchen in Charleston, glinting off the rim of my chipped coffee mug as I poured my afternoon cup, the one ritual I had kept since becoming a widow 4 years ago. When suddenly the phone rang, that jarring metallic sound filling the stillness, and when I picked it up, I heard the sweet voice of my eldest child, my daughter Nicole, a voice she always used when she needed something, soft and syrupy like honey masking vinegar. "Mom, I have a wonderful idea," she said, and I felt that old familiar flutter in my chest that always came when my children included me in their plans, because it happened so rarely now that they had their own lives. And for a moment, I forgot every cold shoulder, every ignored call, every dinner where I was treated like the hired help. And I leaned against the counter smiling as she continued, "What do you think about us taking a family trip for the holidays, all together, just like the good old days when Dad was still alive and we'd drive out to the shore and make sandcastles with the kids?" Her voice was full of excitement, so much so that I could almost see her smile through the phone. And she went on, "I found this beautiful resort right on the coast in Myrtle Beach. Pools, restaurants, activities for the kids. It would be perfect, Mom, truly perfect. And it would mean so much to all of us to be together again." And I set the coffee pot down on the counter, feeling my eyes brim with tears because it had been so long since I'd felt included in anything more than a half-hearted Sunday dinner where I sat quietly at the table while they all talked about their jobs and their vacations and their plans that never included me. Always the one who served the food, cleared the dishes, and listened from the kitchen as laughter bubbled in the living room without me. So when my daughter said she wanted me there, I grabbed hold of that dream like a child clutches a balloon, fragile and desperate. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I've replied, forcing my voice not to crack. "When would it be?" She paused then, her tone shifting ever so slightly, and added, "There's just one small detail, Mom. The resort requires that a single person make the reservation, for security and billing purposes, so could you maybe handle that part? Don't worry, we'll transfer you the money right afterward. It's just easier this way." My heart twisted because of course it was always like this, wasn't it? I was always the one to put my name on the line, to make the guarantees, to sign the contracts, while they breezed in to enjoy the fruits of it. But I told myself it was worth it, because this time it wasn't just another chore. This was my chance to do something special for my family, to prove my love in a way they couldn't ignore. So I said, "Of course, honey, you can count on me." And that same afternoon, I dialed the number for Ocean View Resort, my hand trembling as the cheerful receptionist answered, "Good afternoon, Ocean View. How may I help you?" And I said, "I'd like to make a reservation for 12 people." And my pulse thudded in my ears because I had never organized anything so big before. But I told myself I could handle it. I had to. "Perfect, ma'am," she replied smoothly. "For what dates?" "January 2nd through the 9th, I said, clutching the phone tighter. And then came the rapid clacking of her keyboard before she said, "All right, that will be 5 family suites, all inclusive, full access to activities, spa, and dining. The total is $4,200. And I swear, my breath caught in my throat as if someone had placed a heavy stone on my chest. $4,200? When my monthly pension check was only $900 and I had just $800 saved from months of pies and odd jobs, it wasn't nearly enough. And when she said, "Ma'am, are you still there?" I stammered, yes, sorry. Can I confirm the reservation and pay later?" But she replied with practiced finality, "We do require a 50% deposit to confirm, ma'am. That would be $2,100. And that night, I sat in my creaky rocking chair, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slow circles, calculating and recalculating my savings, the crumpled bills in the cookie tin, the 50 in cash tucked in my purse, and finally my eyes landed on the velvet ring box in my dresser drawer, the one that had sat untouched since the day my husband died. Inside the thin gold band, with its tiny diamond that sparkled when the light hit just right, 42 years of marriage reduced to a trinket. And the next morning, I walked into Jenkins Jewelers downtown, the bell over the door chiming as old Mr. Jenkins, who had known my family since forever, peered over his glasses and said warmly, "Well, if it isn't Evelyn, how are you?" "I'm doing all right," I lied, holding out the ring with trembling hands. "I came to ask what you'd give me for this." And he examined it with his jeweler's loupe, turning it between his wrinkled fingers before sighing, "It's a nice piece, Evelyn. I can offer you $800. And the number hit me like a punch in the gut because it wasn't just money. It was every memory, every anniversary, every kiss and every argument. But I thought of Nicole's smile, of Matthew's kids running on the beach, of finally being part of something, and I forced the words out, "It's a deal." And with that money, plus what I had saved, I called the resort back that same afternoon and paid the deposit. The reservation now confirmed in my name with my credit card as a guarantee. 5 suites, 12 people, 7 days, all inclusive. And over the next few weeks, I worked harder than ever, selling more pies on Sundays, sewing curtains for neighbors, skipping meat at dinner, lowering the thermostat until I could see my breath in the mornings, all so I could cover the balance and give my family this perfect gift. And yet every time I spoke with Nicole or Matthew, they brushed off the subject of money with casual, "We'll talk later, Mom. The important thing is that we're together." And I clung to those words like they were gospel, not realizing how hollow they really were. 3 days before the trip, Nicole called me with her voice sparkling with excitement. "Mom, you have no idea how much we're looking forward to this week. The kids can't stop talking about it. Brian already has all the bags packed. We just can't wait." And I smiled even as I held the phone tighter, because I had just made the last payment on the balance with my credit card. The full $4,200 now gone from my accounts, my savings wiped out, my wedding ring gone from my drawer forever. But her happiness made it feel worth it. So when she asked, "How are things on your end, Mom? All ready?" I replied warmly, "Everything's ready, dear, just waiting for the day." And she laughed lightly, "Perfect. We'll figure out the details later. The important thing is we have fun." And I didn't let her hear the small crack in my heart when she said it. Because to me, the details were everything. The sleepless nights, the long walks instead of taking the bus to save $2, the empty shelves in my pantry where canned soup had replaced steak. But to her, they were nothing. Invisible burdens carried only by me. The night before the trip, I carefully packed my suitcase, folding my best dresses with shaky hands, slipping my late mother's pearl necklace into its case, placing my comfortable walking shoes on top, and laying out my light blue dress, the one Matthew had once told me made me look younger, because I wanted to look nice for the family photos I imagined we would take by the ocean. all of us smiling like those happy families you see in Christmas commercials. And I went to bed feeling like a child before Christmas, my heart racing with anticipation. At 7 a.m. sharp, I was ready at the door, suitcase upright beside me, house locked behind me. And when Brian finally honked the horn from the driveway at 7:30, I stepped out with a smile I couldn't suppress. But as I slid into the passenger seat beside Nicole, who was scrolling on her phone, I noticed only the youngest of my grandchildren looked up from the tablet in the back seat to chirp, "Hi, Grandma," while Nicole mumbled something that sounded like a greeting without looking up, and Brian just started the car without a word. I tried to start cheerful conversation, asking about Nicole's work, about the kids' swimming lessons, about their plans at the resort, but their answers were short, distracted, as Nicole kept typing and laughing at her screen. "Is it very funny?" I asked gently, hoping to be included. And without glancing up, she replied, "It's just my friend's group chat, Mom, nothing you'd get." And my smile faltered as I turned to stare out the window at the bare winter trees rushing past, wondering if maybe I had imagined the warmth in her voice on the phone, if maybe I had wanted it so badly that I fooled myself. After 3 hours, we arrived at Ocean View Resort, and the sight of it stole my breath. The tall palms swaying in the salty breeze, the sprawling gardens bursting with flowers in bright January colors, the white stucco facade gleaming under the winter sun, the fountains at the entrance bubbling like a promise of peace, and I whispered, "It's even more beautiful than I imagined," as the children leapt out of the car squealing with excitement, running toward the entrance while Nicole and Brian busied themselves unloading luggage. A few minutes later, Matthew and his wife Rachel arrived in their car, their teenage daughter Madison hopping out and running to hug me tightly. "Grandma, this place is incredible. Have you seen the pool? It's huge. They even have a game room and shows at night." And I hugged her back, grateful that at least one person shared my excitement. Inside the lobby, gleaming with marble floors that reflected the crystal chandeliers, I approached the reception desk with my paperwork clutched tightly. "Good morning. I have a reservation under the name Evelyn Parker," I said, and the young woman smiled as she typed, "Yes, Mrs. Parker, we've been expecting you. 5 family suites for 12 guests, all inclusive, everything is set." And as she explained the dining hours and activities, I overheard my children whispering behind me. Matthew muttering, "5 suites? I thought it would be simpler," and Nicole replying, "Mom handled it. We'll sort the costs later." And the words pinched at my heart because no one had ever actually discussed paying me back. The receptionist handed me the elegant key card shaped like little palm trees, and I turned, beaming, "Did you hear that, kids? Full access to everything." But when I looked around, there was no one, just Madison standing awkwardly by my side. "Where did everyone go?" I asked, confused. "They went up to the elevators. Dad said they'd meet you later," she admitted, biting her lip. My stomach dropped as if the marble floor had shifted, but I told myself maybe they were just eager to get settled. Still, when Madison pulled out her phone, her face pale, and said, "Grandma, there's something you need to know," my pulse quickened. "What is it?" I asked. They have a group chat. Dad, Aunt Nicole, Uncle Brian, Aunt Rachel. It's called Drama-Free Vacation," she whispered, and my throat closed. "What do you mean?" "They didn't want you to come, Grandma," she said, her voice shaking, and my heart felt like glass shattering in my chest. "But Nicole invited me," I protested weakly. "She asked me to plan it." With trembling hands, Madison showed me the screen, and there it was, their cruel words in black and white. "The old lady took care of everything. Perfect. Now we can finally enjoy ourselves without her hovering. Did you see her face at reception? How embarrassing. At least she's useful for something. We'll just let her stay in her room while we have fun." Each line was a dagger, and I tasted the bitterness of humiliation like bile. My wedding ring gone, 8 months of pies, $2,100 on my card, all so they could mock me. "How long has this group existed?" I croaked, and Madison scrolled up, showing me the date. It had been created by Nicole the very same day she called me with her sweet voice and promises of family unity. Tears burned my eyes as I read more. She fell for it. She'll handle the details. She always does. Free vacation with no drama. Remember, no all-together activities. Everyone for themselves. My vision blurred, but I kept scrolling until I saw the latest messages. Do you confirm with the resort that she can transfer the rooms? Yeah, Matthew asked. Since it's under her name, she can switch it. Perfect. Tomorrow we'll convince her to put the rooms in our names, and on the last day, we'll tell her there was a billing issue so she gets stuck with the debt. I nearly dropped the phone. They weren't just planning to exclude me, they were planning to leave me holding the entire bill, to use me and discard me like an old shoe. Grandma, are you okay? Madison asked, clutching my hand, and I wiped my tears, whispering, No, honey, but I won't let them win. We walked to my suite, a gorgeous ocean view room with a marble tub and a balcony overlooking the beach, the kind of room I had dreamed of for months, but it felt empty, a set piece in a cruel play where I was just the financier, not the star. I watched from the balcony as Nicole sipped cocktails by the pool with Rachel, while Matthew and Brian splashed in the water with their kids, all laughing as if I didn't exist. You know what hurts most? I told Madison. It's not the money. It's that I thought we would finally be a family again, making memories together. She nodded, her eyes red. I told them it was wrong, Grandma, but they said I didn't understand, that sometimes adults make hard decisions. A hard decision. That's what I am to them? A burden to be managed? At that moment, a text from Nicole pinged my phone. Mom, we're having lunch at the beach restaurant. You should just order room service. See you at dinner. And instead of breaking me, I felt something stir inside me, something sharp and unyielding. Tell your mom thank you, I told Madison, but I have other plans. And I wasn't lying. I had plans now, plans that were forming with icy clarity in my mind, because if my children thought they could outplay me, they had another thing coming. That afternoon, while they enjoyed the pool and the cocktails paid for with my sacrifices, I began making phone calls to my bank, to the resort manager, and to my lawyer, because the game had just begun, and for the first time in years, I was holding all the cards. That afternoon, while my family lounged by the pool sipping daiquiris and laughing at jokes I wasn't invited to hear, I sat cross-legged on the crisp white sheets of my suite with my phone in my hand and a notebook open beside me, my heart pounding with a mix of fury and resolve, because I had learned over 65 years that when you've been underestimated long enough, the moment you decide to fight back is the moment you become unstoppable. And so my first call was to the bank, where after a maze at automated prompts and hold music, I finally reached a woman named Karen who introduced herself cheerfully as a fraud prevention specialist. And I explained, with deliberate clarity, that I feared my own children might attempt to dispute legitimate charges on my credit card, specifically a $4,200 hotel reservation I had personally authorized and paid for. And though my voice shook at first, the more I spoke, the steadier it became, until Karen said, I'll make a note of everything, Mrs. Parker, and we'll flag your account. If anyone tries to dispute these charges, it will trigger a full investigation, and until proven otherwise, the charges will remain valid. And just like that, I felt as though I had won the first skirmish in a war they didn't even know had started. My second call was to the resort manager, a man named Thomas Rivera, who answered with a warm professionalism that immediately reassured me. Mrs. Parker, I understand you have some concerns about your reservation. And I told him everything. The group chat, the plan to trick me into transferring rooms, the plot to leave me saddled with the debt. And his voice dropped to a tone of quiet seriousness as he replied, You'd be surprised how often we see families try things like this, ma'am. But don't worry, you are the only holder of the reservation and you have complete control. I'll make sure all my staff are informed. No changes can be made without your consent. And when I asked if he could provide that confirmation in writing, he promised an official letter would be in my email by morning. My third call was to the only lawyer I trusted, Mr. Harris, an older gentleman who had helped my husband with his will. And when he picked up after being pulled from another meeting, he greeted me warmly. "Evelyn, it's been a while. What can I do for you?" And I poured out everything in one breathless stream: the trip, the lies, the secret group chat, the financial betrayal. And when I finally paused, he said gravely, "Evelyn, this isn't just family drama. What they're planning is financial fraud, and it could qualify as elder abuse under federal law. You've done the right thing by calling me. I'll draft a sworn statement that you paid willingly for the trip, and we'll have it notarized to protect you." The words elder abuse hit me like a slap, because I had never thought of myself as a victim, but here I was, the woman who had raised 2 children alone after my husband died, being conned by the very people I had sacrificed everything for. "Do you want to take legal action?" Mr. Harris asked, and I swallowed hard because the idea of suing my own children twisted my stomach. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just want them to stop." And he replied gently, "You don't have to decide now, but know this: you have rights, and you are not powerless." By the time I hung up, the sun was setting outside my window, painting the Atlantic with streaks of pink and gold, and I heard the muffled laughter of my family returning from the pool, carefree and unburdened, completely unaware that their so-called pawn had just declared war. At 6:30, there was a knock at my door, and when I opened it, Nicole stood there with her polished smile. "Hey, Mom, how was your afternoon?" she asked, though her eyes darted nervously, and I smiled back with a calmness that startled even me. "Very productive," I said, and she tilted her head. "Productive? What do you mean?" "Important calls, paperwork, adult stuff." And she replied, just faltered slightly before she continued, "Well, speaking of paperwork, Matthew and I were thinking maybe it would be easier if we handled some of the hotel details, so you don't have to worry about anything." My stomach tightened because here it was, the first move in their plan, but I kept my voice even. "What kind of details?" "Well, just the keys to the other rooms, for emergencies, of course," she said lightly. And I looked her straight in the eye, and what kind of emergency would require you to have access to rooms that aren't yours? She blinked, taken aback by my firmness. "I don't know, Mom, it just seemed practical." And I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Nicole, I'm 65, not 95. I can handle room keys just fine." And for the first time, I saw a flicker of unease cross her face. "Of course, Mom, I didn't mean you couldn't. I just thought—" "What exactly did you think?" I asked, and she faltered, her words drying up. Nothing, forget it. Are you coming to dinner?" "Of course," I said smoothly. "It's my money paying for that dinner, isn't it?" The way her eyes widened told me she knew something had shifted, that the docile mother she thought she could manipulate had been replaced with someone sharper, someone dangerous. At dinner, I sat at the long table with them, watching with new eyes as they ordered bottle after bottle of expensive wine, lobster, steak, desserts for the kids who took one bite before pushing plates away, all on the all-inclusive package that had cost me everything. And I realized that for years I had been blind, seeing my sacrifices as love while they saw them as obligations they were entitled to. I looked at Madison across the table, her worried eyes meeting mine, and I gave her the smallest nod to let her know I was all right, that the storm was building, but it was on my terms now. After dinner, when everyone retreated to their suites, Nicole slipped quietly into my room as we had arranged, her face pale. "Grandma, what's going on? Dad seems so weird at dinner." I told her everything. About my calls to the bank, the manager, the lawyer, about the notarized statement I'd be signing, about the meeting with Mr. Rivera I had scheduled for the morning, and her eyes grew wide. "Are you going to cancel the trip?" she whispered. I smiled, for the first time in days, a real smile, not the brittle mask I had worn. "No, sweetheart, I'm going to do something much better." She leaned forward. "What?" "I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve." And the words tasted like steel in my mouth, strong and unbreakable. That night, while the others slept dreaming of another day of beachside cocktails, I laid out my navy blue suit, the one I had worn to my husband's funeral, because it was the only outfit I owned that made me feel powerful, like armor. And when the first streaks of dawn touched the horizon, I dressed carefully, pinned my hair back, and walked to the nearly empty restaurant to sip coffee and review the documents Mr. Harris had already emailed me, my hands steady now, my fear burned away into resolve. At 8 a.m. sharp, Mr. Rivera joined me, his tie neat, his expression respectful. "Mrs. Parker, are you ready to make some changes?" And I looked him straight in the eye. Yes, I'm ready to make some changes. Because this was no longer just a vacation, it was a battlefield. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for their approval, I was fighting for me. At 8:30 that morning, I followed Mr. Rivera into his office, a warm and elegant space overlooking the resort's gardens, the sun streaming through wide windows where hibiscus flowers bloomed against the glass. And as he poured me a cup of coffee, he said, "Mrs. Parker, I reviewed your case last night with our legal advisor. We want to make sure we protect both you and the hotel." And then he laid two documents on the desk between us. The first, an official statement confirming that I had personally paid for the entire $4,200 reservation voluntarily, and that I alone held authority over it. And the second, even more powerful, an addendum giving me sole control over the rooms, the services, even the ability to cancel individual suites at will. My hands trembled slightly as I touched the paper. "You mean I can cancel specific rooms if I want?" I asked carefully, and he nodded. "Absolutely. You are the reservation holder. You could keep all 5, cancel 4, or even cancel everything if you wished. It's your right." My heart thudded because the idea that had been forming in my mind since I saw that Creole group chat suddenly crystallized into sharp clarity. I took a breath, feeling the navy blue fabric of my suit like armor around me, and said, "Then I'd like to make some changes, but they need to be executed exactly as I describe." He folded his hands, professional and calm. "I'm listening." I slid across a page from my notebook where I had written the room numbers. "I want to cancel suites 501, 502, 504, and 505. Keep only 503, which is mine." His eyes flickered with surprise, though he kept his expression respectful. "Understood. And when should the cancellations take effect?" "Not immediately," I said firmly. "I want their key cards deactivated at 10 a.m. sharp, so they won't be able to enter their rooms after breakfast. At 11, I want your staff to inform them in person that the rooms were canceled by me, the holder of the reservation, and they must vacate before noon checkout. If they protest, you will have security available, correct?" Mr. Rivera nodded, jotting everything down. "Yes, we'll handle it with diplomacy, but also firmness. And if they ask where they can find you," I allowed myself a thin smile, "tell them they're welcome to speak to me in Suite 503, but only if they remain civil. If they shout or threaten, I want security to escort them away immediately." For the first time, I saw admiration in his eyes, the kind reserved for someone who has chosen not to crumble but to rise. And he said softly, "Mrs. Parker, may I ask what led you to this decision?" I met his gaze without flinching. "Do you have children?" He nodded. "2. They're young." "And you love them?" "Of course, more than anything." "Then imagine," I said, my voice steady, though my chest tightened, "imagine discovering that those same children plotted behind your back to use you for money, to mock you, to leave you with thousands in debt while they sipped cocktails and laughed at your expense. Would you let them get away with it?" He was silent for a long moment before answering. "No, I wouldn't." I signed the documents with a hand that no longer trembled, each stroke of the pen a severing of chains that had bound me for decades, and when the notary arrived to make it official, I pressed my name onto the page like a brand. One more thing, I added, as the papers were collected. Could you arrange a taxi for 12:30? For 2 people. He glanced up. Just 2? Yes, I said, glancing at Madison, who had accompanied me quietly, her young face set with fierce loyalty. My granddaughter and I will be relocating to another hotel after this. Mr. Rivera's lips curved in the faintest smile. I'll personally make sure it's taken care of. When I returned to my suite at 9, the resort was already alive with the sounds of laughter, the pool splashing below, music playing faintly from speakers, and I sat on my balcony sipping coffee as if it were any ordinary morning, except that my heart pulsed with anticipation, because in less than an hour, the trap would spring. At 9:30, Madison texted me from her lounge chair near the pool. Grandma, they're talking about going to reception after lunch to switch the rooms into their names. Aunt Rachel said this is the last day they have to pretend you matter. My jaw clenched, but instead of crying, I smiled, because they thought they had time. They thought I was still the naive mother who always signed the checks with blind devotion. But in 30 minutes, they would learn who I really was. At 9:58, my phone rang. It was Mr. Rivera. Mrs. Parker, everything is ready. In 2 minutes, the key cards for 501, 502, 504, and 505 will be deactivated. Thank you, Mr. Rivera, I said calmly. I'll expect to hear from you after they've been informed. When the call ended, I set the phone down, crossed my legs, and looked out at the bright blue horizon, the ocean stretching wide and endless, a mirror of the freedom I was about to reclaim. At 10:07, Madison texted me frantically. Grandma, Mom just stormed off to the elevators. Her key card isn't working. Now Uncle Matthews is dead too. They're furious, yelling at the front desk. At 10:15, my phone lit up with a call from Nicole, her voice high-pitched. Mom, something's wrong with the rooms. The key cards won't work. The receptionist says there was a change in the reservation. Can you come fix this? I held the phone to my ear and replied sweetly, How strange, dear. Are you sure you didn't change anything? Of course not, she snapped. Why would we? I wouldn't know, dear. I'm a little busy right now, but I'm sure it will sort itself out. Busy with what? She demanded, but I hung up before she could finish. At 10:30, Madison sent another update. They're all gathered at reception now. Dad looks pale, Aunt Rachel is shouting, Brian is furious, Mr. Rivera's talking to them calmly. At 10:45, Matthew called, his voice strained. Mom, we need you down here. The hotel says you canceled our rooms. That's insane. You didn't do that, right? I let the silence stretch before answering. Why would that be insane, Matthew? I'm the reservation holder. I can do whatever I want. He sputtered, But Mom, we have kids. We can't just... Then perhaps you should have thought of that before you treated me like garbage, I said coldly, and I hung up. At 11 o'clock sharp, just as planned, hotel staff approached them by the pool with printed notices, and from my balcony I saw the scene unfold like theater. Rachel's face flushing crimson as she waved her arms, Nicole pressing a hand to her forehead, Brian pacing angrily, Matthew trying to negotiate while the younger grandchildren clung to their parents' legs in confusion. Security hovered discreetly nearby, calm but ready, and though I couldn't hear the words, I didn't need to. I saw the collapse of their arrogance in their faces. The moment realization dawned that they had been outplayed by the woman they thought too weak to fight back. At 11:05, there was furious pounding at my door, rattling the hinges, and when I opened it, there they all stood, Nicole, Matthew, Brian, and Rachel, faces twisted with panic and rage, their children huddled behind them clutching beach bags and towels, and Nicole's voice sliced through the air. Can you tell me what the hell is going on? But I only smiled, stepping back into the suite with deliberate calm. Good morning to you too, my dears. Please, come in. Let's discuss the consequences of betrayal. For a moment, the room seemed frozen in silence. The only sound, the faint hum of the air conditioner and the muffled laughter of other guests drifting in from the hallway. And then Matthew tried one last desperate attempt, his voice trembling. "Mom, please, don't do this. If we leave like this, nothing will ever be the same between us." And I stepped closer, placing my hand lightly on his shoulder, seeing not the man, but the boy I had once held through nightmares, the boy I had once carried on my hip through the grocery store. And I whispered, "Matthew, things were never the same the moment you decided I was expendable." And I let my hand fall away. Nicole scoffed bitterly. "So that's it? You'd rather side with Madison than with your own children?" And I turned slowly, locking eyes with her. "Don't twist this, Nicole. I am siding with the only person who treated me with honesty and love. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal." Rachel began to cry then, quietly at first, then harder, her mascara streaking down her cheeks as she muttered, "You're throwing away your family." But I stood taller. "No, Rachel, I'm saving myself. I have given and given for 40 years, and I will not give one more ounce of dignity to people who laugh at me behind my back." Brian, never able to control his temper, growled, "So what now? You just toss us out like trash?" And I didn't flinch. "No, Brian. You tossed me out first when you plotted to stick me with the debt and leave me humiliated. I'm simply returning the favor." At that moment, a soft knock sounded at the open door, and Mr. Rivera stepped in with quiet authority. "Mrs. Parker, the taxi you requested for your family is waiting downstairs. Their belongings have been packed and moved to the lobby." He glanced at Nicole and Matthew, his expression professional but firm. "The hotel can assist you in finding alternative accommodations if you'd like." The shock on their faces was almost comical, as if they hadn't believed I would go through with it until the reality of suitcases waiting in the lobby forced it upon them. "Taxi?" Rachel gasped. "Where are you going?" I picked up the small suitcase I had packed that morning, my hand steady on the handle. "Madison and I are going to another hotel, one where I can enjoy my vacation without being treated like a burden." Matthew's face twisted. "You're taking my daughter?" I looked at Madison, who lifted her chin proudly. "I'm choosing to go with Grandma. You all betrayed her, and I can't stand by and watch." Nicole exploded. "This is kidnapping! We'll call the police!" But Mr. Rivera stepped forward, his voice calm and unshakable. "Madison is a minor, yes, but she is also a registered guest here under Mrs. Parker's reservation, and she has the right to remain with her grandmother for the duration of this stay unless legal guardianship orders otherwise. If you wish to dispute, you can do so through legal channels, but right now, I suggest you respect Mrs. Parker's wishes." Nicole's mouth opened and closed like a fish, her rage sputtering into impotent silence, and Brian muttered, "You'll regret this." But I only smiled coldly. "No, Brian, the only regret I have is that it took me this long to see the truth." Madison ran to grab her small duffel from the corner, and together we walked to the door, but I paused, turning back to the grandchildren still huddled in the hallway, their wide, innocent eyes watching this collapse of their world. I knelt down, touching the shoulder of little Ethan, only 8 years old, who whispered sadly, "Grandma, are we not going to build sandcastles now?" My throat tightened, but I kissed his forehead. "Someday, sweetheart, someday we'll build the biggest, most beautiful sandcastles in the world when your parents remember how to treat people they love." His small arms wrapped around my neck, squeezing tight, and I let myself hold him a moment longer before standing, blinking back tears. "I love you all," I told them softly, "and none of this is your fault. Someday, when you're older, you'll understand why Grandma had to do this." With Madison by my side, I stepped into the hallway, leaving Nicole, Matthew, Brian, and Rachel in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of fury, shame, and disbelief. In the lobby, our suitcases were waiting neatly by the door, and Mr. Rivera walked us out to the taxi personally, his voice low. "Mrs. Parker, what you did took extraordinary courage. Many people would have let themselves be used, but you chose dignity." I smiled faintly. "It wasn't courage, Mr. Rivera. It was survival." As the driver loaded our bags, I turned for a last glance at the entrance, where my children now stood watching. Nicole's face twisted with hatred, Matthew's with hollow regret, Rachel streaked with tears, and Brian set in stone-cold anger. And behind them, the grandchildren pressed close, confused and scared. And though my heart ached for them, I knew this was the only way to break the cycle. The taxi pulled away, and Madison slipped her hand into mine, her grip firm. "Grandma, do you regret it?" she asked softly. I stared out the window at the shoreline passing by, the gulls wheeling in the sky, the horizon wide and free, and after a long moment, I shook my head. "No, sweetheart, I don't regret choosing myself for the first time in my life." We drove in silence for a while until Madison leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder, and I thought of all the years I had poured my energy into raising children who now saw me as nothing but a burden, of the countless sacrifices that had been erased by entitlement, of the wedding ring that sat in some pawn shop case because I believed in the illusion of family togetherness. And I realized that maybe losing them wasn't the tragedy. It was the freedom I had never dared claim until now. At 1 p.m., we arrived at a small boutique inn a few miles down the coast, a charming place with white shutters, rocking chairs on the porch, and the scent of salt air mixed with blooming gardenias. And as we stepped into the lobby, the innkeeper greeted us warmly. "Welcome, ladies. You must be Mrs. Parker and your granddaughter. We've been expecting you." The room they gave us was cozy, with 2 queen beds, a view of the ocean, and a balcony where we could hear the waves crashing. And as Madison flung open the curtains, she laughed, the sound ringing bright and clear. "Grandma, this is perfect." I smiled, my chest lightening for the first time in years. "Yes, sweetheart, it is." That evening, we walked down to the beach, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple, and together we knelt in the sand, building our first castle side by side, the tide licking at our toes, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free, truly free, and I whispered to the waves, "This is only the beginning." The next morning, I woke earlier than Madison, the faint glow of dawn just starting to filter through the white curtains of our cozy inn room, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of dread pulling me back into bed, but instead felt a lightness, a sense of anticipation for the day ahead. So I slipped quietly onto the balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the sun break over the Atlantic and thinking about how my life had changed in just 48 hours. Because yesterday, I was the grandmother humiliated in a marble-floored lobby, stripped of dignity by her own children. But today, I was something else entirely, a woman who had finally taken control, a woman who had refused to be used. Madison stirred inside, her hair tousled, her eyes still heavy with sleep, but when she spotted me, she padded out to the balcony barefoot, curling up beside me with her own mug of cocoa. "Grandma, do you think they hate us now?" she asked, her voice soft, and I shook my head slowly. "Hate is just what people feel when they're ashamed, sweetheart. They don't hate us. They hate themselves for getting caught." Madison's gaze was steady, stronger than her years, and she whispered, "They deserved it." But I touched her hand gently. "They deserved consequences, yes, but bitterness is their poison, not ours. We'll let them drink it while we live free." We spent the morning walking along the shoreline, collecting shells and laughing as the cold waves nipped at our ankles, and though part of me still ached for Ethan and the other little ones left behind, I knew I couldn't let their parents' cruelty chain me anymore, because if I went back to the way things were, nothing would ever change. I'd just keep selling pies and sewing late into the night to pay for their luxuries while they mocked me behind my back. Around noon, my phone buzzed with the first of many messages. Matthew pleading, Nicole threatening, Rachel guilt-tripping, Brian raging. And though the words cut in places, I found myself stronger than I had imagined, reading each one with a detached clarity, as if they belonged to strangers, not the children I had carried inside me. Madison peered over my shoulder at one point, reading a line from Nicole that said, "You've destroyed this family." And Madison muttered, "No, she saved herself." And I couldn't help smiling at her fierce loyalty. Later that afternoon, Mr. Jenkins, my lawyer, called to follow up. his tone brisk but kind. "Mrs. Parker, I've prepared the affidavit regarding the payment of the hotel stay, and I want to strongly advise that you consider restructuring your estate, given the clear intent of financial abuse." The word abuse still felt heavy but less shocking now, as if naming it had taken away some of its power, and I listened carefully as he outlined steps: revoke joint accounts, adjust beneficiaries, secure assets under legal protection, and most of all, document everything. When I hung up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation, as if closing one book and opening another. And Madison, who had been listening quietly, said, "Grandma, you're like a superhero," which made me laugh out loud, the sound surprising even me. "No, honey, I'm just a woman who finally learned to say no." That evening, we joined other guests at the inn for a communal bonfire on the beach, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. And for once, I wasn't the invisible one, the servant clearing plates in the background. I was Evelyn Parker, a widow who had lived, sacrificed, lost, and reclaimed herself. And as I told a lighthearted story about selling pies at the farmer's market, I caught Madison's smile across the flames, full of pride, and I knew I had given her a lesson no lecture could ever teach. But just when the night felt perfect, my phone buzzed again, this time with a video call request from Ethan, my little grandson, and my heart clenched because I hadn't expected to hear from him so soon. But when I answered, his small face filled the screen, his eyes wide and earnest. "Grandma, when are you coming back? Mom and Dad are fighting a lot, and I miss you." And behind him, I could hear Rachel's voice snapping at Brian, the chaos of their broken home spilling through the speaker, and it nearly shattered me. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile for Ethan's sake. "Sweetheart, Grandma will see you soon. But right now, I'm taking a little break, okay? Remember how we built sandcastles? I promise we'll do it again, bigger than ever." And his little nod nearly undid me. After we hung up, Madison hugged me tight. "See, they need you, Grandma. They just don't know how to show it." And I whispered, "Maybe one day they'll learn, but I won't wait for it anymore." Back in our room, as Madison drifted off to sleep, I sat at the desk, penning a letter I knew I might never send, a letter that began, "To my children, I loved you more than you ever knew, but love without respect is slavery, and I will not wear those chains again." And as the ink flowed, I realized that even if they never read it, the act of writing was for me, a declaration that I was done being the background character in my own life. At midnight, I slipped the letter into my journal, turned off the lamp, and lay beside Madison, listening to the waves outside, and for the first time in years, I fell asleep without fear of tomorrow. The morning after the bonfire, I awoke with the sound of gulls calling outside and the smell of salt drifting through the balcony doors. And for a long moment, I just lay there in the white sheets, listening to Madison's steady breathing beside me, marveling at how peaceful the world could be once you cut away the voices that tried to drown you in guilt. And as I rose and slipped into my navy cardigan, I knew this final day of our trip would be a turning point, not just for me, but for the legacy I wanted to leave behind, because I had learned that survival was not just about scraping together coins for pies or pawning wedding rings for the illusion of family unity. It was about reclaiming dignity from the very people who thought they could strip it away. Madison woke soon after, stretching like a cat, and she smiled when she saw me on the balcony. "Grandma, what are we doing today?" And I grinned back. "Whatever we want, sweetheart. That's the beauty of freedom." And she laughed, the sound like music in the sea air. After breakfast of blueberry pancakes and hot tea, we rented bicycles from the inn and rode along the coastal path, the ocean on one side and wildflowers on the other. And with the wind in my hair, I felt years peel away, as if I were no longer the tired widow scraping through winters alone, but a girl again, strong, daring, unafraid. By midday, my phone buzzed again with a flood of messages. Matthew begging for forgiveness, Nicole spitting venom, Rachel promising that I'd regret my choices, Brian accusing me of betrayal. But instead of the old ache in my chest, I felt only a distant pity because I finally understood their words weren't about me at all. They were mirrors of their own failures, their fear of losing control of the woman they thought would always be their safety net. Madison suggested we block their numbers, and though part of me hesitated, I realized she was right. So with one swipe, I silenced the noise, and the quiet that followed felt like sunlight on my skin. In the afternoon, we walked into town, browsing small boutiques, sharing an ice cream cone, laughing as we tried on silly sun hats, and everywhere we went, strangers treated me with more kindness than my own children ever had, and it made me realize something painful but true. Family is not defined by blood, but by respect. At sunset, we returned to the beach, building another sandcastle, this one taller and sturdier, Madison insisting we carve our initials into the wall like a seal of strength, and as we worked, I felt tears sting my eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude that I still had the chance to teach this girl what love without conditions looked like. When the tide finally took the castle, Madison whispered, "Grandma, I'll never forget this." And I hugged her tightly. "Neither will I, sweetheart." Later that night, as we packed for the trip home, I thought about the next steps Mr. Jenkins had outlined, rewriting my will, protecting my assets, documenting every detail of the fraud attempt. And though it was overwhelming, it was also empowering, because for once, I wasn't acting out of fear, but out of strength. As Madison drifted off to sleep, I sat at the desk again, this time writing not to my children, but to myself. Evelyn Parker, you are worthy, you are strong, and you will never again apologize for existing. And when I finished, I slipped the page into my journal, knowing it was a promise I would keep. At dawn, our taxi arrived to take us back to the bus station, and as the innkeeper waved us goodbye, Madison leaned against me in the back seat. "Grandma, what will you tell them when we see them again?" And I answered calmly, "Nothing, Madison. They already know what they did. The silence will be louder than any words." The ride back was quiet, but inside me there was a storm of realization. I wasn't just walking away from one ruined vacation. I was walking into the rest of my life on my own terms. When we arrived at my little white house with the creaky porch steps, the place felt different. Not like a cage of memories, but like a fortress of independence. And as we set down our bags, Madison hugged me and said, "Grandma, thank you for showing me that strength doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go." And I kissed her forehead, whispering, "Exactly, darling." Over the next week, letters came from Nicole, emails from Matthew, voicemails from Brian and Rachel, each one more desperate or manipulative than the last. But I didn't answer. I didn't chase, I didn't apologize, because I finally understood that answering would mean stepping back into the role they had written for me, and I was done being their servant. One evening, as Madison helped me knead dough for pies, she asked me, "Will you still sell them at the market?" And I smiled. "Yes, but not because I need to anymore, because I want to. There's a difference." And she nodded, proud of me. In the quiet of that kitchen, with the smell of cinnamon and apples filling the air, I realized that I had not only saved myself, but planted a seed in my granddaughter, a lesson she would carry into her own adulthood. Never let anyone, not even family, convince you that your worth is negotiable. And so when I sat down to record this story for you, my dear listeners, I knew I wasn't just sharing a tale of betrayal and revenge. I was sharing a testament of survival, of dignity reclaimed, of a grandmother who chose herself after decades of choosing everyone else. Did it hurt? Yes. Do I miss the laughter of my children when it was genuine, the hugs when they were small, the moments before entitlement poisoned everything? Of course. But do I regret finally saying no? Not for a single breath. Because in the end, when the hotel lobby emptied and the laughter at my expense faded, I was the one left standing, and I chose to walk forward with my head held high. So I'll leave you with this, dear listener. If you ever find yourself being treated as a burden by those who should treasure you, remember my story. Remember Evelyn Parker, and know that you too can walk away, because sometimes the greatest act of love you can give is to yourself. And now, tell me, what city are you listening to tonight? Because I'd love to know how far this story of survival travels from my little kitchen to your corner of the world.